Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Matty B. Got a big show today, but first, Matt, you guys are getting into some 7-on-7s. You got an update for us?
Absolutely. Tomorrow, we finally get to kick the dust off and compete against some other schools. We were just tentatively scheduled to do a 7-on-7 last week, and unfortunately, the rain got involved. And there's to me, during this time of year, there's no point in risking injuries. And to be quite honest, no one wants to be in the rain right now. So we canceled, did some work in the gym, and had a pretty productive last week with weightlifting and different stuff. But I'm excited to get out because we're going to be going up against some bigger schools and just to see where we're at. Great learning experience.
Yeah, you know what they say, football players are not tough at all. Once that rain hits, it's over. So I understand why you guys would cancel that.
Well, let me tell you, all it takes is one injury, and then this would be the Southbound gone viral because I would lose my Ever Loving Mind show.
Wait, so you had an injury last year? I thought that was your excuse you had ready.
But there's a big difference between during a regular game and during off-season workouts.
Well, yeah, that guy, he lost $10 or $20 million, didn't he?
Exactly. I could lose $10 or $20 million if my team gets injured. We got a lot of renovations. We got big things in store here at the program. So we want to keep things on the up and up. Well,
definitely keep us up to date, and hopefully you get some good weather. I would hate for you guys to have to cancel the whole 7-on-7 season.
Yeah, so tomorrow we're in it. We're in it for the long haul until they drag us off.
You know, you could just have them build you an indoor practice facility.
Well, we're hoping for some of those boosters to get out and open their pocketbooks so we can have that indoor practice facility similar to that 20-yard one that Miami built.
Hey, only red zone. That's all they have to practice, Matt, at Miami. They have big things on the horizon. They're in the race for a national championship. We're going to talk about that later in the show. I know you got you really excited. So into the NFL. First off, I know I talked about this a little bit last week. I thought Madden was going to be announced, but then they ended up pushing it back to the 22nd, and then they sent a teaser out showing that they're going to do their reveal on the 17th now, because E3, the conference, is basically over. I think the last presentations were today. So they sent out a video, Madden did, showing just two goats in a barn. So that sparked a lot of debate online, so I wanted to get your thoughts. If they're going to go ahead with this title of two goats, who do you think the greatest of all time would be? And if they're going to have two of them, what two players are going to be on the cover this year?
Oh, I would assume then that they're probably going to put Brady on, hoping that he finally just goes away.
Yep, and then you know who else is back? Tim Tebow. So you got Tim Tebow and Tom Brady. Is that your pick?
Heaven and hell.
Well, which one's hell? Not Tom.
Well, clearly not Tim Tebow.
Hey, I don't know. Well, Tom Brady, I would think Tom Brady's number one. Then there's a bunch of other speculation. But if you're going to go with current players, the only prediction that I saw that made sense would be Gronkowski. If you're going to say that he's the greatest tight end of all time, which I think would be plausible. So you would have, he came back out of retirement, wins the Super Bowl. I think he had a touchdown in that game, right?
Yep.
So he had a touchdown, had a big game, could have been MVP. I don't even, did they give it to Tom? I can't even remember what happened. But that would be the one thing that I think they could get away with. But what do you think? And do you have any other ideas for who the second would be?
Well, maybe it would be Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees, since they're both not going to be playing this year.
Aaron Rodgers could still play.
Nah, he's on vacation.
I was going to have a check-in for my list, and I thought, how many times can I talk about Aaron Rodgers? So I held back because I realized every time I say I'm not going to talk about him, I look at our clock and 10 minutes have gone by. So He has until like July 27th, so we're going to give it a couple-week break. I have seen him mentioned, though, but to be honest, only one Super Bowl. If they put him on, that's a joke, right? Same with someone said Mahomes. You win one Super Bowl, you're super young. You don't get the greatest of all time tag immediately.
Well, maybe they go old and young.
I mean, they could, but the way they did it with two GOATs, I'm not really surprised. Now, we did have the other leak that I talked about last week, Derrick Henry, which some people are still doubling down on that. So if you want to go old and young, maybe you have a Derrick Henry, Barry Sanders combo or Walter Payton, and you go two running backs. Because Tom Brady was just on the cover like 2 years ago. Like it feels like they have him on the cover every couple years. So it's just odd. Unless they're really trying to jinx them, like I said, and they go with two Buccaneers, Gronk and Tom Brady. And they said there's no way the curse is not going to get them. But, I mean, if you're looking at the league, they could also go Ben Roethlisberger. He's the greatest Steeler quarterback of all time.
That is fair.
Although, who knows? Tony Dungy listens to the show, so maybe he's going to call up Terry Bradshaw and we'll get a stern tweeting too.
Could be.
I don't know.
I can tell you who it probably won't be is Le'Veon Bell.
Which, did you see his comments about Andy Reid?
Yes.
Do you disagree with them?
I don't even know why. Like, it almost just feels like out of nowhere he just aggressively just comes screaming at people.
But Matt, I kind of agree with them. I think a lot of people are high on Andy Reid, but they're like forgetting however many years he was in Philadelphia. Like there are still Eagles fans that absolutely hate him because of how many times he choked. Even last year, I know he was playing Tom Brady. They should have killed the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers weren't even a good team in the regular season. They barely beat them by 3. Like, how was Andy Reid getting, like, outgunned in all of these games? Like, he had the hottest offense. Like, he had all the stuff. He has the same amount of Super Bowls as John Harbaugh. The guy that everyone's, like, doubting with the Ravens. Like, does he have what it takes? It's like, Andy Reid had the hottest team, and they barely beat the 49ers, and then they lost to the Buccaneers. What if he doesn't win another one? Like, how many good Eagles teams did he choke away?
But let me ask you this, like, without being a homer, what separates, because I see all the statistics about how Tomlin has won, like, his winning percentage is astronomical, and they always point to the fact that he has the 2 Super Bowls, but how much separates, how many good Pittsburgh Steelers teams has he squandered during this time? That I think like he's in that similar mold that he has good teams, he's had good players around him. Should there have been multiple, almost in that mold of Bill Belichick, where you had multiple Super Bowl opportunities? They're not even getting to the AFC Championship and losing. They're like losing in the divisional round. They're losing in these early rounds of the playoffs and getting bounced out. So it's like you should be with the teams that Andy Reid had. Absolutely, he should have won more. But I think you could say the same about guys like Tomlin as well, or Sean Payton. That they put up all these numbers. That there's no hesitation. Peyton Manning is a first ballot Hall of Famer. How many times did he choke in the playoff? Right off the bat.
Well, speaking of him, Trevor Lawrence has been doing awful at Jaguars camp. Did you see this? Like,
no.
And Urban Meyer, I mean, if you listen to the show, you know that I love Urban Meyer. And I will say that he runs such a quarterback-friendly offensive system. Like, his quarterbacks are nothing special in the NFL, or even with throwing accuracy. J.T. Barrett, Cardale Jones. I mean, I know Cardale Jones was an XFL legend for a week or two, but that was it. And then, like, Trevor Lawrence comes into camp, and he's throwing pick sixes. And, like, to throw a pick six, that means that you're trying to, I mean, at least even in training camp, like, that means you're trying to get to your guy where they're undercutting it, and they're able to take it to the house. And typically it means that you're making a completely bad read or you're trying to check down to something that's not there. And just seeing how Urban's system worked in college and like for how many different like offensive quarterbacks and stuff that he's had, there's a lot of safe throws in there and outlets that are open. And Trevor Lawrence is just struggling already to the point where they don't even know if he doesn't start to figure it out, like what's going to happen to start the season. But then I saw a lot of people comparing it like, oh, Peyton Manning threw a ton of interceptions his first year in the league. No big deal. Like immediately, it's not, there's never like, hey, Trevor Lawrence, you know who else threw a bunch? Ryan Leaf. Like, congrats, you could be a bust. It's always like, let's pick one of these great quarterbacks out there and throw a comparison out there. Like, no big deal. Peyton Manning was awful too, remember? Like, how many other guys have busted? And so, if he ends up being a bust, and I'm not saying he is yet, but I'm just saying, like, training camp, you're underestimating the speed you're coming in. Everyone's expecting you to be the guy. That was one of your like strengths, was not forcing the ball. And then you're already doing it to practice. Not a good sign. So, I mean, like you never heard Ben Roethlisberger doing that when he came into camp. You just heard like, hey, his arm's a lot stronger than what we thought. Things like that. He's a lot better at keeping plays alive. Trevor Lawrence is like, yeah, he threw a bunch of interceptions, like really weird. Like he would throw them on like the same play. After he just threw him, they said like that he should know that the guy's there, and then he went ahead and tried again and still got the interception. So I don't know, but it's crazy going forward there that the Peyton Manning stuff. He could be considered even. I wouldn't mind seeing Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. Throw them both up on the Madden cover. Why not? Because I think what's missing right now in the NFL is like a rivalry type thing. You have Patrick Mahomes. Who's he like going to have going forward? Tom Brady's not going to be in the league forever. So doing like the old and the new, they had Lamar Jackson on the cover last year. Is he going to be a strength going forward? They have the struggles in the playoffs. I don't know if there's going to be that next rivalry. You mentioned Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers. Drew Brees is out. Aaron Rodgers doesn't have a team. Who knows where he will end up? But he's also old. Ben Roethlisberger is going to be out. Like, you're going to have a bunch of new quarterbacks. Is it going to be Baker Mayfield that steps up? I don't know.
You could possibly say Kyler Murray could be one that could fit the bill because he's athletic. The Cardinals invested a pile of money in new players to try to push them over the top. I mean, that could be a team that could be on the bubble.
The thing with him, though, is I'm still worried about injuries. I mean, there's still some things where he's going to take some hits, and he's already small enough where he's not going to be able to see over the line. I know people are like, well, we're going to debunk that. We're going to debunk that. These guys are like 6'7". And then they're coming in, which we didn't mention it last week, but there was a lot of flack about Kuhn, the wrestler from Michigan, never played football since high school, getting signed as an offensive lineman for the Titans, like just as a tryout. And everyone was like loving it. Like, yeah, great way to think outside the box. And I was thinking, I told you, like, he hasn't played football since like the exact same time as Tim Tebow. And Tim Tebow was, guess what, in the NFL. He was in high school. So, like, great wrestler, awesome guy. Michigan guy, like I can't be more than happy for him, but like in terms of like getting the hype, like why is that a good story, but the Tim Tebow story isn't? I just don't understand. That's my last Tim Tebow thought for this show.
Now.
Well, I did mention like Trevor Lawrence, like what if it doesn't work out for him and then Tim Tebow has to come in?
Well, and I think part of it is you have to watch how much you buy into the OTAs as well right now, because some of these like off-season practices, this is giving the coaching staff an opportunity to see exactly what they have. So I'm sure they're throwing a pile of stuff at Trevor Lawrence to see how much of the playbook he can digest and what parts of their offense they can use, because you go in and you have your quick passes. You have your sprint out game. You have your boot game. You have all this different stuff that how much from year to year, like there's certain concepts that I think Urban Meyer uses that you look at and you go, all right, well, how much of certain concepts are we going to use? And there's nothing saying just because they drafted Trevor Lawrence number one that they necessarily have to go with him right off the bat. They still have Gardner Minshew on in the fold that they could start him and just say, hey, Lawrence isn't ready. And it's not going to be the end of the world to have him sit.
And that's what I think they should do. But when you have so much hype in one player, I don't think it's going to happen. And I think we'll see. But I just wanted to put this segment out there because I know by the time we do the next show, the Madden stuff should come out. There was also some of the Derrick Henry stuff had leaked with the Xbox stuff. So I wondered if they were going to just have like a more power mode, like Xbox Madden with more power, and then they have like an extra Derrick Henry cover, which they could also do. Like if they did go the Gronk, Tom Brady route, and then they just had like a special edition, which I know I joked last week about having like more packs that you could open, but the extra power is probably just going to be more frame rate. I don't even know if you can tell the difference. I tried to fire up last year's Madden versus like the new version on my TV, and it looked almost the exact same. Like I think everything was pretty much the same. I don't know. I'm not playing with the X. I have the Xbox Series S, the smaller one, but I just don't know. Like I don't see the point in paying for like the extra just to get the Madden. So if you're a fan, we'll wait and see what features they have. But like the game hasn't changed for years. Like that is no exaggeration. Like I picked up Madden 16. That was like the last one I really had. Then I played Madden 20 last year on the summer for this show to talk about. And then they just had the Superstar mode, but everything else was basically the same. So no big excitement coming from me for the game. But I know it's important for the NFL. Maybe they'll have some spin-off games that start to pick up some hype, but I doubt it. The NFL stuff, there was some contract stuff that came out. I've decided to kind of hold off on it because I hate updating like one or two contracts here or there and then like, hey, no one signed this contract. And then as soon as I post a show on Wednesday, I get another like, hey, so-and-so signed the contract. So what I'll probably do is save some of those individual contract things until training camp when we get a better picture. Unless, like we said, something big with Aaron Rodgers or something where there's going to be a move that will change the entire league. But as we hear more stuff, we'll be hitting on some NFL stuff. Did you have any NFL stuff, Matt, to hit on still?
No.
All right. Just as an aside, Facebook Live's being like crazy today with disconnects. I don't know what's going on, but we have the full video. You can check it out on YouTube if you didn't have it, or definitely make sure even if you check it on Facebook, you go download it on your favorite podcast app. It should be everywhere. If it's not, send me a message. Normally, if you let me know, I can get it on stuff like we just got on, made sure it was working with Overcast. We had some people download it there. So if there's some other apps I don't know about, let me know and we'll get it on there. Getting into the NBA and NHL playoff stuff, I know I talked about the NBA being at the point of boring. And so I just wanted to point out that this playoff has actually been a little bit more exciting than the past, just because you have those top seeds. The only one that swept is Phoenix. And if Chris Paul can keep it going, maybe he deserves more credit than what people give him to him or whatever. Because like I think a lot of people just realize like, hey, he's LeBron's friend. Like that's LeBron's friend. And so now this is the year where he can step up. I mean, the Jazz really didn't scare me. And so like the fact that they're tied with the Clippers, I know the Clippers have Kawhi. Sometimes you need that top talent to push you through to the next round. But that Western Division, outside of like the LeBron super team that battled injuries this year and have already been eliminated, I don't even know if I had a favorite in that side. So I think that one's a little bit more surprising to me because you have like the Golden State that's down and a lot of those other teams that normally have been there, like the Lakers in the past. But on the East, both series are tied. I think Milwaukee, like if you're trying to elevate your game and you want to get out of the superstar mode, eliminate Brooklyn. Like the Bucks winning would be so impressive for the rest of the NBA that they could point to it and be like, look. And I saw, like, for some reason, sports fans are so obsessed with, like, the small market. They were like, Milwaukee's a small market. This would be a great win for small market teams. It's like, these guys are billionaires. They have the money no matter what market they're in. Like, I feel like whenever I hear someone talk about that, because that's the excuse you always hear for the Pirates, like, oh, yeah, just small market, it's really tough. It's really tough. You have one of the best stadiums. You could sign guys if you really wanted to. Like, no one's holding a gun to your head and saying, you have to buy the team. Like, you bought the team as an investment, you're running it into the ground. It doesn't matter what market you're in. If someone did that to the Yankees, what would they say? I mean, look, the Mets had their issues. Now they have a guy come into the Mets that just starts paying, and look what happens. Now people are like, oh, the Mets, they're not bad anymore. It's like the Braves won that division for how many years in a row, Matt?
Imagine that.
Like, and then the Mets are like, you know what? Maybe we should get a different owner. And they're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what happened. The market just didn't get bigger because the bullshit that they used to put out there was like, well, the Mets will never be the Yankees. And I mean, the Mets are in first right now. What was that?
Well, not with that kind of attitude.
Well, it's just like anyone. Like, oh, let me go through my checklist of excuses. Small market? No, can't use that. Whatever, because like Philadelphia is the same stuff. Like Philadelphia's not a small market. Well, why can't they compete with Atlanta? Atlanta's not even really a small market either. But like they look at it and they're like, oh, let's go ahead and see, because like Atlanta owns the entire South. If you look at that blackout map, like Atlanta is one of the teams from my area. I actually have three: the Nationals, the Orioles, and Atlanta. Like if I wanted to watch any baseball and those three teams are in, like it's blocked out for me. At least it was last time I looked. How annoying is that? And so when I hear people talk about like Milwaukee and basketball, like, oh, hey, that's a small market team. Like, no, it's small because they haven't been competing. Like the Cavaliers were small until they got LeBron. Then all of a sudden, how many fans did they have? Like they went national. So the Bucks are right there. They have a superstar player. Let's go ahead and get that. Take it to the next level, though. You have to win. If you don't win, no one will care. No one will care. And Philadelphia, they're looking at it, and you could very easily have a Phoenix versus Philadelphia finals that I don't think really anyone would have predicted at the beginning of the season. And I know, Matt, you follow the Sixers, so what do you think of their chances going forward?
Well, I was a little bit hesitant with worrying about how Embiid missing time could potentially affect them, but Embiid playing and being 0 for 22 is also going to be a problem. You can't just brick every single shot. So they got to start hitting some of these shots more consistently. And I think that when you're looking, they had 3 guys being named to the all defensive team. How about you play some defense and just shut them out and be done with it?
And I could very well next week come in and say, oh yeah, the NBA very boring. All the 1 and 2 seeds won. Like those series could both end. All 3 of those, they're all tied. All 3 of them, and they could all end up 4 and 2, with the top seeds advancing. Like we don't know what's going to happen. I'm just saying that right now, and I think they might be playing. I don't know. Do they have the schedule? It's very hard. I hate, like you go to the NBA. The Bucks are winning. So yeah, so then there goes that 4 and 2. So it's only the half though. But we'll see, because like that Nets team, that's the one where you're like, are you going to have that next level stuff? What's Kevin Durant going to do? He put together the super team, and are they going to have their chance? Because you put together a super team, you don't win, people are going to lose respect for you. Like Durant, you won with Golden State. Now, if you lose here and you can't get a championship done when like your LeBron, your biggest competitor, is out, what happens? Like what happens to your legacy? Everyone knows you jump teams. What about Kyrie? Like the same stuff. It's like, where are these guys that all came together? They can't even win. So we'll see what happens. In the NHL though, real upsets, which I did want to mention, because I don't know if I mentioned this last week or the week before, but I didn't realize that Canada had its own division. So yes, I apologize. This year the divisions were messed up because of the coronavirus, and I guess Canada couldn't travel, because I had people message me because I said something about, hey, there is going to be a Canadian team in the Final Four. And of course, there was always going to be one, because they were all in one division this year. So I apologize. I didn't realize that. I didn't follow the NHL. I honestly thought that it was back together how it was. Like, I thought everything was back to normal. They just went with a weird schedule that was later this year. So they're playing Vegas, and Vegas is up. And I don't know how you can't root for Fleury. So I hope that they can get going, because I really don't like any teams on the East. The Islanders are up on Tampa Bay, and I thought for sure Tampa Bay is going to come back. And they're going to have the Tom Brady hype. They just won it. They won the Cup. They're going to win another one. And if they win, because it would be back-to-back, I think, which would really deflate. The Penguins had that back-to-back, which was like the only back-to-back in the modern, the salary cap era?
Yeah.
So that would kind of take away from them. So I just wanted to bring that up. And they're even doing it in the coronavirus. So not only do you have the salary cap restrictions, and was it them? I think it is them. They're over the cap because of like a bunch of injuries. So it's kind of, I would put an asterisk beside it. If I was a Major League Baseball writer, you know how they put asterisks beside everything, and I was the NHL version of that, I would definitely put an asterisk beside that. So I don't think it really counts as a back-to-back. But that's just my thoughts, Matt. What do you think?
I agree. I'm rooting for Fleury at this point, just to see him continue to do well, because I was disappointed when they had to let him go, and he's just still doing some good things. So.
And that's a franchise that I think a lot of people can get behind out west. I know you always talk about like, oh, out west and down in the South, they don't care about hockey. But now you're having teams from those sections like Tampa Bay winning, that it kind of is like, oh, okay, maybe they do care. I don't know. Like I've seen people fly Tampa Bay flags in my neighborhood, and I'm like, did they buy them because they beat the Canes? Or did they have that ready to go? Like, were they just fans from last year? Maybe they were fans. Maybe they're from Tampa. I don't know. Too hot for them. They move up north. Not even that far north though. But that's my last hockey thing. Do you have anything else?
No.
Trying to give ample time for college football, because I know I always push it at the back, and then I never have it. But I had some big stuff for college football this week. The first thing, the blue chip ratio, we talk about it every year. They released it for 2021. I thought that it was a lot earlier this year, and I think there are some things that you need to consider whenever we talk about this. The blue chip ratio, they look at your recruiting class only. Because like I've already got messages from Matt talking about how Florida State is relying on transfers, and so this is bullshit. Why did I send this to him? This doesn't count. And so I'm going to just say it. I want a reminder, Matt. The blue chip ratio, you have to be above 50% to win the national championship. There've never been a national champion below a percentage like that. Yet, Florida State had 53 that one year. That was the last BCS one. And then Clemson was 52. I think that was the lowest. I was trying to look back through their first year, because a lot of people, they see Clemson on this list, and I think a lot of people think that Clemson was like this superpower. And one of the things that we talked about, the expanded playoff, that looks like it's going forward, we went back. Let me see if I have it, because I think I sent it to you. I'm going to see if I can bring it up, where they went through and tried to get a list of all of the programs back through the BCS era, which to me, that's more important. Because if you're looking at this and you have like a list of like, all right, what am I looking at? What team is a power team? How do I know? If you go to the 12-team playoff and you go back past the playoff era, then you'll know which teams have been sticking around for a longer time. Because back then, it was a success just to play in the BCS game. And that helped recruiting. Now, it doesn't help at all. Like, no one's sitting back and being like, hey, I'm going to go to this recruit's house and tell them, hey, did you see us playing that Fiesta Tostitos Bowl? And they're going to say, what the hell is that? Like, when was that? Was that a playoff game? And you're like, no. Like, oh, no, then I didn't see it. Or like, where were you? You're at the Blimp Bowl? Like, I don't know.
You're out catching Pokemon.
The Detroit Bowl? Is that city still around? Like, that's what people are like looking at. And so this had a hypothetical 12-year playoff or 12-team playoff going back to 1998, which was the first BCS year. Clemson, Matt, would have never made it until 2011. That was the year they got killed by West Virginia, like 77 or something like that, to whatever they had in the Orange Bowl.
Bowl game.
So then after that, then 2015, they've made it every year since. So even though Clemson has had 7 appearances, and if you look at just the recent appearances, like, oh, in the playoff bowl, you think like, oh, Clemson's like this power program. Like, no, they're not. They were nowhere near the top of the ACC for a longest time. They got lucky, and it very easily could have been Florida State before them. Because if you look at it, and there is some crossover here where Florida State would have made the playoffs in 2012 all the way through 2016. That was the year they played Michigan in the Orange Bowl, which under this system could have been a playoff game, which everyone talks about how all the playoff games are blowouts. That was a hell of a game. And I think that's the kind of game that would add hype to it, where you don't win the conference. What are these other teams going to do? Like, if that was a play-in playoff game, like, why not? That was an awesome game. I think that would have kicked stuff off great. And so after that, though, Florida State, they're done. Like, they fell completely apart, and they let Clemson take over, and they've been in the playoffs ever since. And I think they were in it even before that. That was the year Clemson won the national championship. But Florida State never kept that bump of like, hey, we were in the playoffs for like 3 years in a row. They were never able to use that just because of the way the cycle ended for them. They got screwed. So Clemson took that to the next advantage, and so they're slowly creeping up. Because I mentioned that they were at 52% in 2016 when they first won it. They're now at 67% blue chip ratio. They're right above the second tier. The first tier is still Alabama at 84, which they said is an all-time high. And this means you're signing more 4- and 5-star recruits than you are 3-star recruits. So 84% of Alabama's recruits are 4- and 5 stars. And they said that a lot of the ones that weren't were special team guys like punters and kickers. They could very well have been at like 100% blue chip guys. How are you going to beat that? It's going to take a lot of luck and like basically having the talent. Well, Auburn's on this list. Like, you at least have to have a certain amount of talent to match it. Georgia, 80%. And then Ohio State, 79%. Out of those three, Georgia's the biggest letdown by far. And it's not even close. Like, I don't understand. I know that they were like, we got to get rid of Mark Richt. And then now they have Kirby Smart. It's like, all right, what are you doing with all of this talent? Because let's be honest, Matt, they're not just losing to Alabama every year. Like, if they were doing that, I could see people being like, all right, just not our thing. They're coming in with 2 losses, like 1 loss. Like, what are you doing? Like, losses to teams that before they even get to the championship. And then they're losing again, and then they're getting eliminated. Or whenever they luck out and don't have to play Alabama in the championship game, they win the SEC, and then they lose to Alabama anyway in the playoffs. And it went to overtime. Like, I think if that might have been the switch where if they would have won that national championship, maybe it puts them over the edge. I don't know. But what do you think of Georgia's program? Do you think they can turn it around? Like, how do you get out of that mode where you're just the team that always loses? Because I think that mindset sinks in.
Well, I think part of it, and this is why when you had sent me about the blue chip ratio, I think the ratio has mattered in years past where you haven't had as many players moving around. Well, due to some of these new rule changes, I think that eventually there's not going. It may not happen immediately, But I think over time, what you're going to see is that there's going to be less of an emphasis placed on the blue chip ratio, because if you're say you don't have a strong running back room, well, now you can just look at the transfer portal, see what running backs are available, and potentially sign a former 4-star running back that was committed somewhere else. So, I look at it both ways. On one hand, I look at the teams like Georgia that are 80%, that they're not a consistent playoff team. They're barely consistent to be competitive within their own conference, let alone across the NCAA.
But that's where I think it comes back to coaching. Because, if you look at Justin Fields, they let him go. They didn't give him a fair shake at Georgia. He ended up being a first-round draft pick that took Ohio State to 2 playoffs, and they had a run in the national championship game. But it's Georgia, what are you doing? Why are you having these kids transfer? Are you lying to them? Or are they dropping bags like people say they are? And so that's the allegation from one of their high school coaches in Georgia, that they're just dropping bags when players get on campus. They realize that's not how it is, and then they're oh, well, now I want out. And there's really nothing to stop them. It's not like Georgia can say yeah, I need that McDonald's bag back. And they're what McDonald's bag? And they're that's not how it works. And so I don't know. They are on this list. So if you go all the way back, Ohio State would have been the team with the most appearances, 17. And then Oklahoma, 16. Then you have Alabama, Florida, and LSU. Those are the top teams. And then Georgia and Oregon would have been at 10. And that's kind of going down from 12. Florida State would have been next at 9. And then USC rounds out the top 10. Before then, you get into Boise State, which Boise State would have been a big bump. And then they're looking at, I think it was the Mountain West or someone. One of the conferences was going to make some changes. I can't remember which one it was. I should have wrote it down. Once this 12-team playoff thing leaked, everyone's kind of yeah, no, we're not going to do that anymore. So your school, was it North Dakota State, the one that's been winning all that FCS stuff? Yeah. They were going to move up and potentially take that spot. Now the rumor is that they've been told, yeah, we don't have a spot for you anymore. Our conference is kind of set, and we don't want to add any more teams because we know that we might have a chance to make the national championship, or at least the playoffs. So I think you're going to see some shifting, because for Boise, what would stop them from becoming that power again? They had all the extra recruiting for that area and their conference because they were in the BCS so many years in a row. When that kind of dried up and it turned to the playoffs, no one cared anymore. I think they lost some of that hype, and I think that's why you see a BYU picking up some of that extra Western talent, maybe a Utah or someone that can take that away from them. If Boise State makes the playoffs one year and then the next year they can take care of that recruiting again, what's stopping them? You really are only going to have to battle against one other team. Cincinnati, are they going to always be there? Is Luke Fickell going to go somewhere else? I don't know. UCF, we've seen how they've been up and down since Scott Frost left. What's going to happen there? Is it going to be Coastal Carolina? Is App State going to solidify their rise to power and run off a bunch of conference championships and playoff appearances if this happens? You have to have a team like Boise that gets enough respect on a national level because you pull off some upsets, win your conference a bunch in a row, and then you have that. I think the surprise would be Kansas State, but that was a lot of Bill Snyder before he retired, and then Notre Dame, TCU. Theirs was kind of similar to Boise State, and then I think you have a lot of the other similar ones: Wisconsin, Clemson, Penn State, Texas, Michigan, Auburn. Michigan State's one of the lower ones, and then after that, that was the last team that had above 5. Stanford, I think, was on there too, and Virginia Tech. If I skip, I can't remember what I was reading. So those would have been the teams that have made the playoffs. I think you hear a lot of blue bloods throughout there. You could argue maybe TCU, Kansas State, Boise State would have been teams that made a bunch of playoffs that didn't have it, that aren't on this list. So the blue chip ratio, very, very similar to that playoff list. I gave you the top couple. After the Clemson, you would have LSU, Oklahoma, Texas, Florida, A&M, which wasn't on the playoff list, but they were in the other conference. You got to remember, they didn't have the recruiting that they have now. They were in the Big 12. They were always behind Oklahoma and Texas. Now that they're in the SEC, they kind of flipped that script. Texas hasn't been doing as well on the recruiting in-state, like locking down talent. I know that all three of them are on the blue chip ratio now, but a lot of the top talent like isn't going directly to Texas anymore. Then you have Michigan, Auburn, Oregon, Penn State, Notre Dame, Miami, and then USC. So Miami would have made the playoffs 4 times, but they're one newcomer on this list, and they're saying that over the next 2 years, if their recruiting continues, that they're going to be creeping up on that 60%. So what do you think of their chances, Matt, of winning a national championship? I know you're a big fan.
Well, I would much rather them not be on the upswing, but if you can recall back when they hired their offensive coordinator, I said this is a really good move for them to have Lashley come in as the offensive coordinator. He was working well with Malzahn, and they had a great system that has been proven over time to be successful. That I think it helps that they're able to do some creative things, and they have a lot of athletes and have typically been able to do it. To me, what I think really starts to separate it, and you see this at the very top in the NFL. A lot of it boils down to what's your quarterback play like? What is your quarterback doing? And I know we've kind of talked about with Michigan. They pull a lot of high-ranking recruits in a lot of places, but they just don't get the consistent quarterback play to really have that big push to be competitive with Ohio State on the big stage. You know, I think when you look, Jimbo Fisher hit a massive home run when he signed Jameis Winston and came out as a freshman and just absolutely torched teams. He graduates off, and you see a little bit of that drop-off trying to find that next replacement signal caller. Clemson, it's no surprise that their entire run right now has been built on the back of Trevor Lawrence. Now, it's to be determined if they can maintain that progress through the transitions with coaching changes and players leaving like Alabama's been able to do, but Alabama's been doing it for so long under Saban that he has a routine and a system in place that it just kind of breeds success. Coaches rehab their careers, and he pretty much at this point has his pick of which players he wants to pick from. It's just do you pick the right character guys, or do you take some chances on guys that potentially influence your locker room? I think when you look at some of these other programs, you know, one of the ones that you didn't bring up was Liberty, and I think as long as Hugh Freeze stays, I think they're going to be a much more dangerous program going forward because they're playing tougher with the ACC. They're playing tougher with some of these Power 5 games that they're matched up with, and they're willing to play whoever, wherever. But I think that's when you look back in the 90s when Bobby Bowden was building Florida State. He said, I'll play anyone, anywhere. And so it didn't matter. You get those bigger games. And when you start to be more competitive with those guys and you say, hey, we're going to play Alabama, we're going to play Georgia, we're going to play, you know, these top ranked teams, you're going to if you think you're that type of player, come beat them and improve yourself. And I think that's a way that you can improve your recruiting classes, and in the process, you know, make your teams more competitive.
Well, see, Liberty didn't make it because I'm just looking at a cross-reference between historical success and then recent recruiting. Because, like, I mentioned USC at the bottom and how they would have been having a run. If you look at, like, their playoff years, Pete Carroll was the head coach. Like, for most of their playoff years, so, like, without him, was it the head coach? Is it a quarterback issue? Like, Michigan's been consistently in there outside of, like, okay, the Rich Rodriguez. They wouldn't have made it with him, and they wouldn't have made it with Brady Hoke. They would have been close, but they wouldn't have made it. Even Penn State, like with Joe Pa, only 3 appearances in however many years of the BCS he was there, which seems like forever. James Franklin would have been a lot of their appearances. Is it a quarterback thing? Is it a system? I don't know. Clemson, you mentioned Trevor Lawrence. Don't forget they had Deshaun Watson. Like, they struck gold twice, which is kind of rare. Like, Ohio State was close. When they got Justin Fields, that felt like them striking gold, and it was almost like, are they going to win a national championship? Finally, were they able to get a quarterback? Like, the Cardale Jones thing was so out of left field when they did win it that it was kind of like, that's still Urban Meyer's system. That was very run-heavy. After that, with the J.T. Barrett years, he kind of switched and let Ryan Day take over the offense. Justin Fields was like a gift to him from Georgia. Georgia was kind of like, yeah, we don't want to win the national championship. So let's let this guy go to you. And then Ohio State, they didn't get it done. So now, like, what's going to happen? Are they going to have, I know they've been pulling in a bunch of, like, high-level quarterback recruits, but has Ryan Day shown that he can develop them? We don't know. It's just been so long since, like, the Tressel years where they had a run, and then they landed legendary coach Urban Meyer to follow that up. So they had 2 back-to-back of their greatest coaches throughout this entire run. If they would have went back even further, Ohio State probably would have been one of the top ones, but maybe not so much. I mean, Oklahoma had some rough years too because they're following up. This is basically the Bob Stoops era followed by Lincoln Riley. So 2 programs kind of where they have had success with great coaches and then kind of handpicked their successors that have kept it going. Alabama had the rough year in the middle there before Nick Saban got there. So, like, you have to have coaching, I think, consistency, and you have to have, I think the coaching pulls in some of the recruiting stuff, but you also have to have that quarterback play. Because I think, like, that's what separates, like, the Boise State. They always seem to have quality quarterbacks. Look at BYU this year. Liberty has one. Are they able to make that step? I think the downside when you bring up Liberty is they're not in a conference. They're not going to have a chance to get into the playoffs. Is a conference going to take them? Because I had already mentioned about North Dakota State. They were trying to come up. Conference says no. NCAA says, well, we're not going to let you be independent. Stay where you are. They don't have anywhere else to go. So, like, they need.
In the A-Sun.
That's not a big football one, though. That's for
not Power 5.
Yeah, but I don't think they even have Division I football, do they?
Yeah, because it's the same conference as Coastal Carolina.
Is it? Why don't they join for football then?
I believe they are in.
Oh, because they were still independent. I'm looking to see. Let's see what the future members are. Oh, this is confusing as hell. How many members does this conference have? Okay, so Liberty left in 2018 to join the ASUN. Yeah. Does this have football? This isn't the Coastal Carolina one. They used to be in the Coastal Carolina one, the Big South. That one is Division I, I'm pretty sure. I want to say the ASUN doesn't have football. No, they do not. So yeah, whenever they made their switch, they went independent. They were trying to be the Notre Dame of the East. Because I remember that was like part of their marketing thing.
Yeah.
Where they're like, we're a private school, we'll play anywhere. And then the other teams were like, yeah, but we really can't risk a loss to you because that would get us out of the playoffs, so we can't schedule you. So now they're left like playing desperate programs like Virginia Tech, and don't they play Virginia Tech?
They played Virginia Tech. They beat Virginia Tech. They beat Syracuse.
Yeah, so they're playing the desperate programs. They need to play like when East Carolina and who else played Virginia Tech and beat them and got a big bump? Was it Boise? I think maybe it was. Like they were actually in the playoff consistency. Virginia Tech hasn't been relevant for a decade. Like their last chance for what a BCS game would have been the Brady Hoke game they lost, right? That was 2011. Like that's how long it's been. I don't think they've ever been close to that level since, but I could be wrong. I mean, even on here, it's 2009 was their last relevant year. So if Liberty wants to make a bump up, they need to do what UCF does and go after like some SEC middle school teams like in Auburn. I know Auburn wins the national championship, so maybe I should say like Mississippi State. I think that would kind of give them some bump. But I also don't think they would schedule Liberty, if we're being honest. I did have one other stat here to bring in, and this is 5-star commits. So if you're a Georgia fan, you might as well just turn this off. Georgia has had 23 5-star commits since 2017. It's the most of any school. So not only do they have one of the top blue chip ratios, which is 4 and 5 stars, they're bringing in the top of the top talent and not winning, Matt. Like that's how bad this is when you look at these numbers and how they just haven't achieved. Like everyone around them in that top list, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Alabama, Florida, LSU, have all won national championships recently. Georgia, I think they said that on that list of blue chip ratio, only Oregon, Georgia, and A&M haven't won a national championship in the last 30 years or whatever. Like everyone else has won a national championship. And someone was like, well, you're cherry picking. Georgia won it in 81. So if you went 35 years, they would have gotten it. But it's but why? They have the most 5 stars. They have all this stuff. Why can't they take it to that next level? I could see if Michigan State, they've been close, they've made the playoffs and they haven't gotten it done. They haven't been recruiting at that level. So okay, it's understandable that they would lose. Why is Georgia losing to some of the teams that they lose to? I just don't get it. Then the rest of the list, Alabama, 21, Ohio State, 19, Clemson, 15. They've been getting up there since their first national championship. Then LSU at 10, which they also had a national championship to help boost this. Then you have, I would say, the second tier, which is USC and Texas at 6, Michigan, Oklahoma, and Texas A&M at 5. And that's what I wanted to bring up, the A&M stuff. Now you have Texas and Oklahoma letting A&M take 5 5-star guys that in the past they didn't get. As soon as they joined the SEC, they got that bump. And I really think that a lot of people forget that distinctively hurts the Big 12. Because you're keeping a couple key guys away from Oklahoma, away from Texas. I've seen people comment, why is Oklahoma, why haven't they broken, why can't they break through? They're close, but on this list, they're basically on the same level as Michigan, where you need to get lucky and have a top quarterback to take you to that level and then build on that recruiting to get basically Georgia level. I mean, it's much easier to take Georgia level. If Georgia would fire Kirby Smart and hire a coach right now that actually pretty much knew how to coach, I think they would win the national championship. Maybe they keep him as their recruiting head and get some assistants in there, but there's zero chance that they shouldn't be winning at least one in the next 4 years. That's my last comment on this. If you're a Georgia fan, you have to be disappointed. Also, the disappointing thing on that 5-star list and the top talent, Notre Dame and Penn State. I don't know what happened to James Franklin because I think a couple years ago he was on that 5-star list. They didn't capitalize. I know that they got snubbed in the playoffs. I'm sure that hurt recruiting. And now when you don't even have it, how are you going to compete? That's why Michigan can crush Notre Dame by 5 touchdowns. People forget that had just happened the year before. This past one when they got wrung out by Alabama in the playoffs. They've been fortunate to get into the playoffs. Now, with this conference tie-in thing, I wonder how much that hurts them and how much that will lead to them to join the ACC. I think they do. But that's my last thought on it. Do you have anything else on recruiting stuff or anything that we talked about?
No, I think we covered pretty good.
Yeah, college football, I mean, we definitely like it. That's one of the things we cover here on the show, along with the NFL. So we'll be following up. That's the early stuff. There is a talent composite that is released later with the transfer and stuff. It's been getting a lot closer to the start of the season. So I don't know when that will come out because, like Matt said, you have guys you sign as a 5-star. They never show up on campus or they show up for one practice and transfer away. Why does that count for your blue chip ratio? But at some point, it's about pulling in consistent talent every year to keep that rating up, even if you're losing some of the guys. It just depends on how many key players you have. which I didn't even move our topic thing. So that was our big thing for college football that I wanted to talk about. There was another thing that came out in the news, very Joe Paterno-like for Bo Schembechler, where I think we talked about this. I could be wrong, but it's very similar to the allegations, I think at like Ohio State, where there was a doctor on the campus of Michigan that was assaulting young men when they came in for their physicals or like when he was working with them as a team doctor. And so it hasn't gotten a lot of national press conference until there were some players that spoke out against Bo Schembechler, accusing him of knowing about it. And I think the one thing that really highlighted it was that his stepson came out and said that he told Bo and that he knew. And, I mean, basically, it's very similar. We talked a ton on Joe Paterno. And this kind of stuff, when the Joe Paterno stuff happened, there was a big thing that came out where, I forget, I was talking to someone and they were like, you don't understand, and this is a Penn State guy, they were like, you don't understand, this goes on at every university, and you're going to hear about it. And I was thinking, like, every university lets young boys get assaulted on campus? Like, it just seems like that would be the craziest thing I ever heard. And so now you're seeing more of like the team doctor thing. I think this is probably what they meant, where you have doctors that just take the extra thing, and I think a lot of people just don't question them. Because the difference between this, and if you're wondering, the difference between the coverage of the Michigan one and the Ohio State one versus the national coverage, because I keep seeing it brought up, Penn State and Michigan State. The Penn State and Michigan ones, they were assaults on underage children. Like the Penn State one was boys from his like camp or whatever he ran. And then the Michigan State one were like underage girls on the United States gymnastics team. Like that's a national team that, like you talked about last week, brings in however many gold medals. There's an extra level of scrutiny there. I mean, he was involved directly in the Kerry Strug incident. So of course that's going to get a lot of more national coverage than, and I'm not trying to downplay the severity of the Ohio State and the Michigan, the doctor, their thing. But I want to say the Ohio State doctor was like their wrestling doctor, right? And this one was like the Michigan football team doctor. So if Bo Schembechler knew, if you're wondering, my stance is the exact same on the other ones. Take down a statue. I don't think Penn State should have put the Joe Paterno statue back up. I understand he donated a bunch of money. Keep his name on the buildings, but why have a statue of the guy? Why do it? The Schembechler one should have been taken down immediately. People that are rallying around, I saw one of the radio guys saying from Michigan, like, this is going to hurt because you might lose donations. Like, what the hell are you talking about? Who cares about that? Like, if he let his players down, take his stuff down, remove his name from the buildings, whatever you need to do, like, if it ends up being true, the other thing with this one is when Penn State happened, Joe Paterno and Sandusky were alive. Joe Paterno died, but Sandusky's still alive. Larry Nassar still alive. The Ohio State and the Michigan one, both doctors and everyone around the programs at that time have died. So you're not going to find any additional information. Bo Schembechler's family came back today, and they said that he was not aware. His wife, his son, and his daughter-in-law said that he was not aware of the allegations, and they kind of threw shade at the stepson that came out. And I know his other son said that he thought that he was lying. But like I said, everyone's dead. You'll never know. If you want to know my stance on it, it's the same as the Penn State one. Take down the statues. If you want to make a statement, if you want to be the leaders and the best, prove it. Why this is controversy. If this was any other thing, like if it was like an actor, like most of the time they're just going to fire him. Like gone. I know Disney kept that one guy around. It's like, why? Why hire him back? I forget what his thing was, but that's my thing with the football. Matt, what are your thoughts on it? Do you have anything to add?
I don't know. It's just it's so difficult because to go back through and then I don't know. Like if you can 100% prove, then absolutely take everything down. But until they go through and allow the courts, because I hate this where people rush to conclusions and it's this automatic. Well, he has to be guilty until proven innocent. You know, let whatever's going to happen legally work its course. And if it turns out that there's some kind of settlement, some kind of decision, some kind of whatever, then by all means do whatever you want. But for as much notoriety as Bo Schembechler has brought to Michigan, I think he deserves to have an opportunity to have whatever allegations be tried.
And see, that's the thing. Like, he's dead for however many years now. It's like over 15 years or close to it. It was the 2006 game. It was like the eve of the game against Ohio State when they were number 1 and number 2 that he died. So you're looking at it. The Penn State one, like, they had statements on it, like where they had told Paterno to disavow him, and then he still had a locker room key somehow. Like, there are people from that case that are actually in prison. This one, you're not going to see it. So like I said, I don't want to downplay it. And I also put it on the big board because I don't want people saying like, oh, you're a Michigan guy, you're not going to talk about it at all. Like, that's not the case at all. Like, my stance is exactly the same as those other ones.
Because I also think,
go ahead.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but you look at some of this stuff, like with Paterno, with Schembechler, there's not a way to be fully accountable for all of the facilities and all of the things and all of the stuff. With the programs are too big, so there has to be above the coach level. It has to be a university policy. It has to be across all sports, because if it happened during football, then I guarantee that it was happening across other sports and in other situations as well. It's not just like, well, we're just going to strike down this one subsection, and that's what I feel like ends up happening at times.
And that's where, like, you're looking at this, and as you read some of it, it was almost like, okay, we see the allegations, but at some point they're coming to him. I would think that there would be a paper trail, or at least something. I know there wasn't the internet back then, because they were saying some of this happened in 1972, where the university wanted Bo to fire him. And so I would think that they would have proof of that. Like, at some point there has to be proof. Looks like Matt dropped off, but like there was some with the, hold on a second, because it's probably muting mine. So, like, I got you back now. So, like, with the Penn State one, there was supposedly a hard drive that the DA had that had some of that information on it, and that DA went missing. I don't think they've ever found him, did they?
I don't know.
I mean, so, like, that was very shady, where, like, I think with the Michigan one, they should have that same thing where they can have, like, the evidence. And so then you have the same thing where, like, hey, yeah, this DA supposedly has some stuff. He goes missing. His laptop's found, but the hard drive's out of it. So it's like, all right, that's kind of weird that would happen. And so with this, like, if they have the evidence, completely disavow them. I don't see the point. Like, I don't see the harm, actually, in just removing the statues for now, because, like, why? Why have that? Like, same with the Paterno ones. Like, why have that if it's going to be something where people look at it? No fan is going to look at that and be like, you know what? Like, every time they look at it, it's going to be like, yeah, that ended horribly. Like, I just don't see the point of having, like, living statues, like, unless it's like a Roberto Clemente, where, I mean, he died doing something great. So, like, I'll honor the guy. I just don't know. So we can keep talking about stuff like this. It's going to keep coming up. And like I said, that when Penn State came out, that was one of the things that a lot of people had said, that it wasn't the only, you're going to hear about it at a lot of other schools. Like, look at LSU. What happened with that one? All of those people are still alive. Have they done anything? If Coach O knew no one's going after him. Like, you would think that if they're going to go after Bo and they're going to have to go after all these other coaches for ones that have happened years ago that you don't know, unless, like I said, unless they have proof, which we never really saw against Joe Paterno. We haven't seen against Bo yet. It's kind of just like a he said, she said type thing. But I also wonder with the age difference that I brought up earlier, like these are, I know a lot of the guys come in maybe 17, 18, but like the players, they become adults. So like he's starting a lot older than what you normally hear in assault cases like this. And so I wonder sometimes, like, did they just not believe that it was actually real? Because like a lot of players said that it was like a joke. But was it a joke for all of them? I don't know. It's a weird situation. Like I would like to see more information, and I know that they had some come out where it was like the one guy said that he had a cut on his arm, and when he went in, the doctor told him to like drop his pants for a full observation. But like to me, that would kind of be like, if you're going in for a cut on your arm, why would you do that? I mean, that's just like an honest question. So like, I wonder how much of it just needs to be awareness, because they're not teaching any doctor etiquette at school, Matt. They're not. You
don't think?
Have you ever learned when you're growing up? Did you ever have a class on like, hey, this is inappropriate touching at the doctor's office? Like, hell no, you didn't. Every time you hear about doctors, you always hear about like how great they are, how they're heroes, and all of this stuff. So I think that type of thing where you're a kid and all you hear about is how doctors are heroes, doctors are this, doctors are that. And then when something like this happens, you're kind of like, all right, that couldn't have been what I thought it was, because like, why would such a hero do that? You know what I mean? So maybe it needs to start at a younger level, like starting to raise some awareness against it. Because like the first time a doctor comes out like that's kind of odd. But now this is the third doctor that we've heard of. Nasser, I don't know the guy's names. Is it Anderson at Michigan? I don't know the guy from Ohio State's name. But like at some point when the doctor is able to take advantage, maybe we should start teaching kids as they're growing up what is appropriate at the doctor's office. Because I don't know what other way to stop it, to be honest. Like even the Nasser one, they were saying it was happening with the girls while their parents were there. Like how bold is that? So, crazy. Do you have anything else on it?
No.
I just wanted to talk about it. I know I didn't want people saying like, oh, they're not talking about it. Of course, typical Michigan guy skipping it just like everyone else. Like, no, my thoughts are the same. I think that they need to start seeing, why is this so widespread? Why is a doctor able to take advantage of guys that are in their 20s or 18 and above? Like his stepson was only 10 or something. Like that's an age where, very similar to like the Sandusky, you can groom them. But like at some point you need to know like that wasn't what I came here for at the doctors. So add it to public school. I don't even know what else you could do. But that needs to stop, because that's crazy. So now I feel like as a parent, you have to tell your kids like, hey, what happened at the doctors? And you're going to have that talk. You're just going to have to. For the final bell, do you have anything?
Yeah, I want to congratulate the Lady Noles on a good season. They came up a little bit short versus Oklahoma. Shame on ESPN, though, for scheduling the third game of the national championship at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Thursday. Nothing like just completely saying, who really cares about it, like scheduling it mid-afternoon.
I know. I thought it was on at night, because I remember Michigan played Florida in the national championship, and I swear it was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And so I knew when the games you had started, because we talked about it, the first game was on when we did our show. So I thought, oh, they must have just changed it this year to Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at like 7 p.m. or something. It was always like a primetime type matchup. And then you texted me and was like, I kept getting all these texts about you, and I'm like, what the hell is he talking about? So I looked it up, and I'm like, the game is on at 3 in the afternoon? Like, this is a joke. Like, there's no way. Like, why would you do that? And softball is one of the sports that gets more viewers. So like for them to even throw it at 3 is weird. And so I wonder like why ESPN? I agree with you. Like why? I don't care what teams are playing. But if you're going to say like, oh, so-and-so, like the softball players aren't going to get paid as much. It's like, were you giving them the same opportunity? They would never put a men's national championship game on at that time. Maybe like a lacrosse or soccer or something, but like the baseball always has that same time slot. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're going to do the baseball one the same. But I told you, and for people that aren't aware, those schedules are put out months in advance. So it's not like ESPN had something where they were like, oh yeah, we have to hurry up and flip this to 3 p.m. Like, no, they knew the schedule. And NCAA always looks at TV. And they know that softball is one of the highest watched women's sports. I mean, I think gymnastics was on national TV when Michigan won this year. I think it was on ABC. So, like, there are some that get a little bit more depending on what it is. But softball is pretty consistent. ESPN has always shown it for, like, 20 years now. And so for them to do that, that's just wrong. I have to agree with you. And
you know what? I would even say I would give ESPN a little bit of reprieve, a little bit, if they weren't pounding so hard on their political drum about equality and all this stuff. That you have an opportunity to set a high standard and put it as a prime time matchup. And do you practice what you preach when you have the opportunity to do it? And this is where I feel like their character comes into play. No, they just sweep it right under the rug and move it along.
And I mean, just going a step further with that, it's a kind of like the same thing, not just in terms of like the coverage of like the WNBA and stuff. They don't push that as hard as they do the NBA. You see ads everywhere. I've never seen an ad for the WNBA. Ever. I see ads for all kind of weird international sports like cricket in India and stuff. I've never seen an ESPN ad, and I think they own the rights for the WNBA. So it's weird. If they really wanted to push people to it, I mean, they show me how many ads for like the Idaho Chip Bowl. You would think that they would have an ad on the internet just for whatever else they need. But I don't know. That's my main thing. And so they need to just do a better job. In terms of the NCAA baseball type stuff, though, NC State upset Stanford, or not Stanford, jeez, I'm going crazy. Arkansas, the overall number 1 team, and they got crushed in the first game because I thought, I'll see how NC State's doing. 21-2.
Ooh.
I thought, well, that series is over. Nope. Came back and beat them at home. And a big upset. So great for them. I'm cheering for them. Hopefully they can go far. I was actually so I was telling someone about this the other day, but in 2016, Coastal Carolina won the national championship game. They played NC State in the NC State Regional. NC State was winning the game 3, I think 5-4, and it got into a rain out. So it was the top of the 9th, I think. Coastal Carolina, I walked down to the game, and they scored 3 runs to win 7-5 in the last inning. I was like, I've never seen the place so deflated. Like everyone was pumped. Like, oh, we only need, I think it was just 2 outs, a double play, and you win the game, and you're going to Omaha for the World Series. And instead, Coastal Carolina beats them, and then goes on to win the national championship to even rub that salt in the wound. That's how close NC State was that year. They beat them. Who knows? That could have been them winning the national championship. So hopefully they go far. But that's my last thing. Do you have anything else?
Nope, that's it for me.
All right. Thanks for listening to the show. Like I said, we'll be hitting some more college football stuff. If any additional information comes out on the Bo, we'll bring it back into the show because I know we did have a couple shows on the Dr. Nasser stuff at Michigan State. There was a lot of additional information that came out on that. I don't know, like I said, if everyone's dead in this case, I don't know if that's going to happen. But if anything major breaks, we'll definitely talk about it. So if there's anything else you want us to talk about, please let us know. We'll be probably hitting on Madden and some other stuff. So thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.